Welcome to the Backyard Professor Live Show. I am the Backyard Professor, Kerry Schertz, and tonight I have a really interesting guest on that I am just so excited to share with you, my audience. This gentleman is a neuroscientist. He is the epitome of what it takes to let me stop that for a second. My goodness, I have my other channel on. He is the epitome of what it takes to be inquisitive, to be knowledgeably inquisitive, to have the blend of skepticism and faith and belief that I'm hoping to have and that I try to emulate on this. Look, let's face it, man, the UFO topic is bizarre and it's not getting easier. It is just not getting easier. And so here we are. And I'm going to bring on Bruce, and I'm not going to say his last name because I'm going to let him tell me because I don't want to mispronounce it. I can undeniably confirm that his last name is not Smith. So I've got that under the bag. Hey, Bruce, how you doing?
Hi, Kerry. Great to be here with you tonight.
Oh, it's so awesome. It's so awesome to have you on as my guest. Thank you so much. I am very excited about tonight. Now I'm gonna pronounce your last name Rapuano.
Terrific. I don't know why you were apologizing in advance.
Oh,
that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to call you Bruce.
You handled it.
I'm going to call you Bruce, so I'm not worried about it. I just want to make sure I get I've been called, my last name is Schertz, and I left out the R in fourth grade once on a paper, and when they read it back, and I was so embarrassed, I cried like crazy, and everybody laughed at me, and the teacher didn't understand and sent me to the principal's office. The principal understood what happened, but yeah. So anyway, all right, Schertz with an R, Rapuano with a P. So you reached out to me here a few weeks ago after I had got on this UFO investigation for myself. And I have been finding out new ways of understanding the UFO. I'm going to call them UFOs. I have sympathy with the idea that the change from UFO to UAP kind of downgrades it a little bit because the idea is UFO has bad connotation, and now everyone's yelling that they're changing UAP down to drones because of all this UK drone business and the New Jersey drones and all that jazz, and it's really getting people mad. So I'm going to call them UFOs, but you reached out to me and mentioned that you had some information that you were an abductee yourself and that you'd written a book about it. And that immediately perked up my eyes. And I said, please let me know where I can get that book. And this is it, A Scientist's Own Alien Abduction Encounters. And I've read this book and I really enjoyed it. The thing I love about it is your experiences. You have had more than one through time. It wasn't just a one-off and then destroys your life and puts you down in the dumps and blows your psychology all the smithereens, but it was an ongoing thing for a little while for you in your childhood, and yet here we are, and you're a successful neuroscientist, and you're a wonderful adjusted person. So for my audience, who are you? Tell us a little bit about your background, why you chose neuroscience. I think that's utterly fascinating. You and I are going to become good friends, and I'm going to have you on this show several times, I'm sure, because of your chosen field of endeavor. So who are you, Bruce Rapuano? Take it away, my friend.
Well, Carrie, first of all, let me say hi to your audience. I'm happy to be able to share my story with them. Um, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I have a neurobiology bachelor's degree with um, actually, it's a major in neurobiology with a minor in psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. And then I became so uh, interested and passionate about neurobiology that I then obtained a PhD in neuropharmacology from the University of Connecticut. And that PhD in neuropharmacology involved the study of the effects of drugs on the brain. Um,
Drugs? You mean like bad ones, good ones, or
Psychoactive drugs, antidepressants, and things that have some.
mushrooms and the whole thing, huh?
Yes, yes, because I also studied animal, plant, and microbial toxins that have these sometimes beneficial, but sometimes detrimental and even psychedelic effects on the function of the brain. But I also, at some point, I was interested in the legal profession, and at night I obtained my law degree from the university from New York Law School here in New York City. But to tell you the truth, as much as I was fascinated with neurobiology, I also became very fascinated with the general subject of cell biology and how cells throughout the body and all of the organ systems functioned. And actually did cancer research at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, New York City, um, where I studied the effects of um, I studied effects of cancer, I should say, in the skeleton and
Oh,
how to kind of protect against those um, deleterious effects of cancer that's invaded the skeleton, and also studied as a result of those particular investigations um, the basic biology of metabolic bone diseases like arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis. And not only that, went on to develop or try to develop the next generation of orthopedic implants, dental implants, artificial knees, artificial hips, and learned a lot about material science because we're trying to alter the surfaces of these titanium alloy materials that were used to form implants, whether they're artificial teeth or artificial hips or artificial knees. We were trying to understand the surface properties in order to make these implant materials integrate better with the body's tissues and have a longer life in the body after implantation. Um, but I learned a lot about cell biology, even though I had a background in neuroscience, and actually um, studied, did some research in a variety of disciplines. And
so
that's
you've been
basically,
around the block with
yes,
various
yes.
types of science. I mean, this is pretty much all inclusive for the whole human physiology, so to speak, huh?
Yes, and I also want to mention that I have some background in health physics. Since no one was doing it, I volunteered to be the radiation safety officer for our research division when I was doing research into metabolic bone diseases. And I think you mentioned you have a similar background, similar interest in health physics. That's it in a nutshell.
Wow. I mean, you are the epitome of what we hope a lot of scientists are. You don't just get stuck in a certain groove and leave it there and stagnate, but you make a living. You appear to me to have branched out in a lot of other different types of sciences, and that is so cool. Now, you and I have talked on the phone, and we will do more videos on this in the future on the idea of uh, the religious, the spirituality
Hmm.
aspect
Hmm.
of UFOs, et cetera. Maybe we can get into that a little bit later. But right now, what I'd like to, we'll put a pin in that, as the YouTubers say, and we'll circle back around to that. Your abduction experiences began pretty early in your life, and they didn't just stop with one or two that you're aware of. Why don't you I think what's so interesting here is I interviewed a woman who was an abductee years ago when I was in college. And I asked her in advance, I asked, would it be okay with you if I interview you about your incredible abduction experience? And she was okay with that. But her experience just basically destroyed her life. It was sad. It cost her her marriage. Her husband was a scientist, and she couldn't deny what had happened to her because it had happened to her, and it caused tremendous problems at his business, at his place of work, and they ended up getting divorced. And back in the 1990s, that was not the time to say you were abducted and that you have had this hair raising, horrifying, intrusive experience in your life. And this is not for glory and books and TV shows and documentaries. It destroyed this woman. I'm looking at you. I've read your fabulous book. The science in this thing is incredible. I look at you and your life.
Thank you.
You've got it together, Bruce. You are so multifaceted with very fascinating problems in how to help people heal and work on the mind and all. So, would you mind telling us your experience, if you would, and then how is it that you chose to go into neuroscience after your how long did it last, et cetera? How did everyone react to you, et cetera? Tell us your story about your abduction. That's what I'm saying or asking.
Well, I think you touched on it at the beginning of our conversation that, I had these experiences, and with a lot of abductees, it really has the potential to really destroy their lives. Other people are able to tolerate; they're vulnerable for some reason. But frankly, these experiences for me began so early in my life, at a time when I had this. I think I mentioned to you this fascinating curiosity, mainly with things scientific, actually initially with human biology. And so, I didn't really know that there was anything bad that was happening to me. I thought I wanted to understand as much as possible about who these beings were, why I was being taken, what was their purpose, why were they interested in me, and what were they doing to me. I tried to make sense of it. And for some reason, as a child of 6 years old, that's the year then where I had my most uh, the, the highest number of my experiences, and the experiences that have had the longest, most long-lasting impact on me, because I remembered them into the last detail for the rest of my life. But I wasn't afraid as much as curious, and didn't really know what to make of them. In fact, my ultimate explanation as a child was that I'd been taken by a group of the strangest doctors I'd ever seen. They were all basically my height, 3.5 to 4 foot tall, had disproportionately large heads.
So how old were you? How old were you?
6 years old.
Oh, okay.
What I remember being taken to, what I described, what I felt at the time, at the age of 6, was a clinical environment. I thought I was in a hospital. I had fallen asleep after witnessing a UFO outside my bedroom window, and I saw a very strange looking airplane. I thought it was an airplane, but the fuselage was more circular than tubular. So, as I say, it was very unusual design to this airplane, just flying right over the rooftops of the apartment buildings in our neighborhood, just a few blocks away. It did something very strange. I ordinarily would have been fascinated to continue to view this unidentified flying object for as long as I could. Instead, I turned my head away from it, fell asleep. When I woke up, I was in this environment that I describe as a hospital-like environment, with dozens of these beings, these humanoid beings that we now call the Greys. As I say, they have the classic Gray anatomy, 3.5 to 4 foot tall, with the large hairless heads. I couldn't make out many features, but I just saw dozens of them. And I, for some reason, thought they were doctors, but they had caused me to become indignant because I didn't realize why that without my permission they had taken me to this particular environment. And at one point during this episode, I was on an exam table. I sat up, pointed at them, and said, "Hey, you're not my doctors. How did I've been to
Really? You
I've been
sat
to
right up and said, "Hey, you're not my doctors."
I
Really?
had seen a pediatrician. I had seen an ear, nose, and throat specialist. I know what doctors look like, but but my these weren't my doctors because only my parents would have brought me to the doctor. And
Yeah,
at that,
you had just all of a sudden just boom.
but I was angry. Well, I want to know if I can call it anger, but I was indignant, and I pointed at them, and that's when something happened, because I probably shouldn't have called attention to myself, but there was some intervention that caused me to lie back down on the exam table, and I didn't want to resist. For some reason, I completely yielded to this unseen force that either was in my mind or near me while I was sitting on the table, and caused me to lie back down and lose consciousness. Now, I'm trying to recall the follow-up question that you had asked.
Well,
Here's the interesting thing. Fast forward to after quite a few of these experiences at the age of 6, at the age of 10, at the age of 11 or 12 or 13. I'm in school, and I've had a number of experiences. Almost, I could say, for each of these abduction experiences, I had the experience of receiving communications that were not verbal communications from these beings. But
look at this.
I'm sorry. Here we have some comment here.
Yeah, lunatic astrology. I am an experiencer. I was with John Mack.
Oh, wow.
90s, one of his crew. Dr. Rapuano was talking about something I know about, but I also had numinous and amazing encounters, and others witness events with me. Isn't that fun? That's interesting. So thank you for your comment, lunatic astrologer. I love your handle, by the way. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought that because you're familiar with John Mack, aren't you?
Very, very interesting. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And it sounds like this particular abductee had been interviewed by Dr. Mack, one of the most famous UFO alien abduction investigators. And so I, of course, would love to hear about that story. But what I was getting to was the fact that, gosh, at the age of 12 or 13, for some reason, I became, after having all of these episodes where I received some type of telepathic communication, for some reason, I became fascinated with the subject of ESP, extrasensory perception.
Sure.
And I studied it so much. None of the books I was reading were assigned by my teachers, but I wanted to learn as much as I could about the subject. Even anticipated that I would apply to the Institute of Parapsychology at, I think it was called the Ryan Institute at Duke University, when I got to the age where I would be applying to college, and became so interested in the subject that I think it was my 7th grade teacher had invited me to give lectures on it to the class, and which is what I did. I gave some chalkboard lectures about the subject, and I think
kidding, in 7th grade, man. I was off playing football. I was doing the dumb stuff. You had the good stuff.
Now, I have to say, some of the students were amused, but others were quite interested and even fascinated by my discussions, as it were. But but getting to your question, I really believe that's the reason why I chose to study neuroscience.
Now,
you mentioned college and graduate school,
parapsychology and some of the psi research, etc. Now, isn't this remarkable? Do you think it's because you had that experience with the I'll call it telepathy? You had communication between the beings. At least that's how you're interpreting this, because all
Yes.
of a sudden you are being talked to. You're hearing a voice. It's telling you things. When you get to the part about the little deal up your nose, you have an experience there with
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
of a voice talking to you. It's so interesting because uh, Dr. Alexander, Dr.
John
General
General. Right.
Alexander also has come out and said the UFO phenomenon is more than just technology, folks. This is a multidiscipline
Hmm.
subject where we have to learn things like remote viewing, psi communication, psychic abilities. We're studying astrology, etc. Now, you, as well as I, Bruce, we were raised on orthodox science, and you do it very well in your book. I'm telling you. I love that part about your book. I'm not kidding. But this stuff kind of, back in Carl Sagan's day, this was fringe. And yet
Hmm.
we're seeing now that we're changing to where we have to know this. Isn't that remarkable?
Right. Right. You
Yeah.
know, we have to study the nuts and bolts, the materialistic aspects of the phenomenon. But there's so much evidence, as you're alluding to, that these beings, whoever they are, these entities, interdimensional from another galaxy, we don't know what their nature is. They're seem to be not interacting with us as in our physical bodies, but there's a direct, what I would call a non-physical consciousness to consciousness interaction. That, since we human beings don't even know the nature of consciousness, it's something we really need to get up to speed on. And but to get back to my story, I frankly, I don't know whether this interest in neurobiology that I later pursued, in college and graduate school, was something that resulted from all these telepathic communications I had with the alien beings, or whether or not I was led down this path unconsciously, unwittingly, as it were, because that's what I was supposed to do. That somehow this was something I was supposed to learn about, because as a species, and perhaps maybe a lot of abductees have had this experience, were also led down the same path that I was, to try to move the human race in the direction of understanding the right way to interact with the non-human intelligence that is in our midst, that is trying, for whatever reason, to communicate with us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think I became interested in the general subject of neuroscience.
Yeah. Yeah. So were you always
You went out there?
what?
No, I lost you for a second. I lost the audio
Oh,
and video. Can you? Okay, but I think
yeah,
you're
you're
back
here
now. So,
now.
okay, great.
Were you always having your experiences by yourself, or were there other people who had these experiences or saw you have your experiences?
I was by myself, except for one particular episode, and at that time, I didn't know what was about to happen. We were just a bunch of kids. I was 10 years old. We were playing a game of kickball in our front yard. So this particular incident was witnessed by 8 other people besides myself. There were the 7 other kickball players, and also my mother had seen this. And I was the first to see, while we were playing this game. It was around dusk in the summer. Never forget the date, June 19th, 1965. I saw a light in the sky. It was an incredibly bright light, but I couldn't get a good glimpse could not get a good glimpse of this object in the sky, because it was blocked by an oak tree in our front yard. And I walked past the oak tree toward the backyard, the front door of our house. And then I turned around to face east, and I saw a massive light It was, I describe it in the book as the biblical Star of Bethlehem. It had the appearance of a star, but not a point source of light like that from an airplane, helicopter, a star or planet. This was literally 2.5 to 3 times the size of the full moon. And it was so bright, it was almost too bright to look at. Silent, motionless in the sky. And as I'm looking at this object, the other people in our group kind of saw that I'd left the game and walked over to the front lawn where I was standing and kind of watched it with me. And we're all watching it for maybe 30 to 60 seconds. And one thing that bothered me about this was the fact that for some reason I noticed the environment around us had changed. There was this, what I can only describe as this sense of a feeling of strangeness, because I couldn't hear any sound. Normally at this time of year, the sound from the grasshoppers and crickets in the neighborhood was you.
I lost your sound for a second. Did you hit the mute button?
I did.
Yeah, okay.
How about
Keep
now?
going. Yeah, now
Okay.
I can hear you. Yeah, you must accidentally hit it.
So what I'm describing is that what other people have described, particularly the abduction investigators or UFO investigators, as this Oz effect, the feeling of the sense of strangeness, where suddenly you feel like you're detached from your surrounding environment. But I tried to look away from the object just to do kind of a reality testing and see maybe if the sound came back. Maybe I thought that I was just so obsessed with watching this object that I just lost track of what was happening around me. Well, after doing the reality testing, I noticed, I looked away from the object toward the backyard of the heavily wooded area behind our house, still couldn't hear anything. But now it got even stranger because the boy standing next to me appeared to be frozen. He wasn't moving. He wasn't talking. He literally appeared as if he were paralyzed, which at the time frightened me. I knew something was, it was strange to begin with, but now the whole situation and experience was getting stranger and stranger and stranger. So I turned my head away from him to look back at the object, and in a very disjointed way, suddenly the light went out as if by flip of a switch. It would really happen too fast for it to occur naturally, but that's what I experienced. That's what I saw. In its place was a red fireball. I would say probably the size of a dime held at arm's length. And now I noticed that this object was beginning to move, still silent, couldn't hear anything from the object, but it was moving at a constant rate, maintain a constant altitude and direction. And I followed it for maybe a minute and a half. I was counting 1001, 1002, till I got to 90, and it disappeared over the horizon. And walked back to the group because I had actually walked to a neighbor's a yard, yard that was adjacent to our property. And then I came back and started to talk to the rest of my classmates and friends about what we had just seen. And I think I'll stop there in case you have any
I'm
questions.
about to go out. Hold on. I got to plug my computer in. I'm going out of power.
I'll give you a chance to ask a question or two if you have one.
Okay. Boy, I just about lost this whole broadcast. My computer was counting down 10, 9, 8. I was out of my battery power. Okay, so that is fascinating how you so what do you think what's the point? Why are they picking on children? No, we know they do. We know they visit adults, right? Now, I've never been an experiencer. And so well, at least that I can remember. My wife kind of thinks differently. Someday I'll share that story a little bit, but maybe I have been an experiencer. I just don't know it. I can't remember a lot, and I haven't been hypnotized or anything like that. But so you had an implant, didn't you?
Yes, and again, it happened, to the best of my recollection, at the same age when I had that experience of being in this hospital, alien hospital, with all these
Well,
strange
that was
beings around
fairly
me.
early
That was
on.
that was at the age of 6. I remember it was the same year, and I remember this. I was just walking in the hallway in our apartment, and I just had a flashback to having some type of what I would call a metallic sphere with studs of projections on it. I think it was silver in color, maybe like no larger than the size of a BB from a BB gun, 2 to 3 millimeters in
Oh,
diameter. And then I had an associated memory, a memory associated with the memory of this particular object, this strange metallic sphere. That was, I was told to be careful that if I blew my nose too hard or if I sneezed too forcefully, it could become dislodged. And
they
that's
told
the
they told you
well,
that?
I somehow had this memory, second
Oh,
memory, that was
okay.
associated with the first memory of the object.
Interesting.
That's how I knew, Kerry, that it was a nasal implant, right? Because if you
Yeah.
sneezed, it could come out. That's the only, because I never have, I don't have any other memories of having it inserted inside my body or removed as other abductees do. In fact, there's an abductee by the name of Betty Andreasen, whose story was written about in a couple of books by the famous UFO investigator Raymond Fowler. And the name of the book was The Andreasen Affair. And what was startling to me is that she described the same object that I can recall as a 6-year-old. And this was in the 60s, same decade. She described the projections on the outside of it and being on a table where she could actually recall the procedure. I think she had hypnotic regression, remembered this tall gray with a sharp probe, like a medical probe. On the end of this probe was this sphere. And she could remember that she was paralyzed on the table. The the gray had inserted it into her nose, and when the probe was removed, the object was no longer at the end of it. And the almost, well, there's the startling, shocking thing is, I can tell you that I know of a third person that's described the same object, the same type of implant
Huh.
that was removed from a different part of the body, but again, same size, looked like a BB with these projections on the surface.
So they never really told you that they were going to leave you with an implant or something.
No, no,
Uh,
no.
what do you think those are for? I read the books, the Mac book and the Hopkins book decades ago, so I'm fuzzy on that. But what would you think the implants are for?
Well, the first thing that Bud Hopkins talked about was what
Hopkins, yeah.
many Bud Hopkins talked about, what many investigators have theorized about, that they're tracking devices. We study animal biologists study animals in the wild, and they're
Oh, sure.
implanted, right, so that
Yeah,
they can
yeah, yeah.
follow them and see, you know what their migration pattern is,
Yeah.
and also when they later need to obtain biological samples, where to find these particular subjects. That's one function, but there have been so many reports where people can remember having the implant, abductees, I should say, can remember being on board a UFO, having the implant inserted into an ear, behind the ear, or inside the nasal cavity. And then after that, they undergo some type of psychological examination where they
From,
can,
from the aliens?
Yes, where they see images,
Really?
they hear sounds, they relive events in their life, and a number of the abductees I've mentioned, they feel as if their minds are being probed, that the aliens are using these devices to study human brain function, um, perhaps to learn how the human brain works, and perhaps to download human memories, and thoughts, and feelings, emotions. And I speculate in the book, another function of the implant is to be able to learn how, at least for the aliens, to learn how to be able to control human neurobiology, control our mental states, perhaps um, with the goal in mind of learning how to control our species by the use of, by the knowledge of how the human brain works, and perhaps a lot of the information that they obtain, the scientific information the aliens obtained, is through the use of these implants. That's my theory.
Yeah, that could, unfortunately, that could, and I'm not trying to put words into what you're saying either, but I can see how that can turn into something somewhat sinister if they try to control the wrong
Right.
people. Uh, any of us, as far as that goes, we humans won't look kindly on that. And so, and this might go into, now, as I have studied this subject, uh, we understand basically, based on what I've heard. Now, I don't know this personally, but Danny Sheehan and others have said that
Mm-hmm.
there are many different types of aliens out there, and the Greys are definitely one of them. And and then you have I just posted a video earlier today. Ryan Bledsoe had a wonderful interview with Chill Queen, where he described some of the information.
Chris, Chris
Yes,
Bledsoe.
his father is Chris
Oh,
Bledsoe.
oh,
His
okay.
son Ryan, yes. And I did a commentary on on
Mm-hmm.
Ryan's interview. Yeah, thank you. I meant to say that, but didn't. But he talks about some of the things that the orbs that Chris sees told
Mm-hmm.
him about our future, etc. That gives me the impression that this is good that's happening. So, quite frankly, we're not quite sure where this is going to end up. And that's what makes this such an enigma. Do you have an outlook that might be, what is your outlook on the potential end game here? Good or bad, indifferent? What do you think? What do you think they're doing?
Well, I discussed the possibilities in the book. The most sanguine one is that these beings are trying to uh, experiment on us for our own benefit, perhaps so that they can um, develop, or allow us to learn how to develop specific abilities that perhaps we've lost through evolution, to interact, or to see things that we can't see, to see into other dimensions, or to interact and communicate with beings that may be interdimensionals. There we may have um, certain areas in the brain that are important for communication with these alien beings, that the potential may be that if we develop these particular functions um, in the brain that have been lost, that we may be able to interact with them more effectively, and that is the end game for one or or for some of the alien species that are interacting with us. And the less optimistic view is that, as you said, that they're trying to learn how to control us, because they want to be able to avail themselves of the natural resources on this planet, and therefore they need to be able to gain control over the planet. They need to be able to gain control over us. Uh, a number of investigators have talked about the multiplicity of, for lack of a better term, alien species are visiting the planet that have different agendas, and that they theorize that the grays may be the ones that are the most unpopular because they're probably, according to some theorists, here for their own benefit and experimenting on human beings, and other species may have a different end game where they're interested in having human beings join the cosmic community, and perhaps they have the goal of trying to accelerate evolution, our human evolution, so that we can do that. So there are conflicting agendas among these various alien beings that may explain some of the very different experiences that different abductees are having, based on which particular beings are abducting them.
That is remarkably interesting. That's a lot like Men in Black. as a smart, sort of funny comment, and yet in a way they don't make those movies in a vacuum. They have been trying throughout our lifetimes to get us somewhat primed, ready for a huge change that just appears to me to be we appear to be accelerating toward a change in our societies around the world, ready or not. And that was one of my reasons for going on the religious side of this, and yet I haven't stayed with it a whole lot, but that is perhaps one of the more fascinating. That's why I think Diane Pasulka, Jacques Vallée, and several others are so interesting to study, because they do go through this psychology, this religious view, because so many people, their experiences, they give a spiritual interpretation to. So I'm not trying to get too personal with you, but do you see your experiences in a spiritual light, or is this more just a physical situation that happened with you? Has it affected your faith? We haven't even heard what faith you are. If you don't want to say, it's all good to me, doesn't matter, but kind of take us down that road, if you would, and help share your philosophy of all of this.
Well, I don't know how it's affected me, because I am a Christian, a baptized Roman Catholic, and I think of the beings that I've interacted with as being actual physical, having physical corporeal form. And so, it appears to me there's a lot of evidence from what I've read about and from my own experiences that, they are beings like us, but simply much more advanced technologically. So they're physical beings. They seem to be humanoid. So in some way they may be related to us. We don't know how. It's possible. One theory I have that I express in the book is that the Greys were bioengineered by a much more advanced alien species to work with us human beings. And, they have some of our DNA. They have some alien DNA, but they might have been bioengineered from one of our early hominid relatives 1 million or 2 million years ago. But I know a lot of people are talking about the philosophical or the religious underpinnings of this entire alien and alien abduction phenomenon. And I don't know what to make of my experiences, but in terms of where I come down on the side of how much we should explore the religious perspective in order to better understand this phenomenon. I know we need to investigate that, but I'll kind of get the discussion going by making a bombshell admission to you that I
All
haven't
right,
told
bring it
that
on.
I haven't told anyone, and I don't know how to integrate this experience into the rest of my abduction experiences. Maybe others can help me, but I haven't told anyone that at the same age where I had most of my early abduction experiences, pretty close to the age of 6 years old, I could remember having a telepathic communication while I was in the apartment from where I was abducted at the same age. And that communication was, there is no God. And it felt as if I knew it wasn't my voice. I didn't know whose voice it was. I didn't know. Now, I was, as I say, I've received at that time the sacrament of communion. I was about to receive the sacrament of confirmation, and was a Roman Catholic for the rest of my life. But I thought, gee, should I believe this? Why should I believe this? I was a inquisitive child, but a very questioning child. And I always questioned what any adults, whether it was my parents, any other adult, or whether it was one of my teachers, I always questioned authority and questioned what anyone told me, even if they were an adult that I had to, of course, naturally have a lot of respect for. So I questioned that, and I always wondered whether, even at that young age, whether or not that was an attempt, that represented an attempt to deceive me. For what purpose? Were these alien beings trying to manipulate me? Or was there some religious aspect to this that I was not thinking about and really have not explored?
Yeah, you were only 6. I mean,
right. But I haven't explored that since, and wondered, as I've told one or two podcasts, whether that's something I should explore in terms of how I can explain my own experiences to myself.
But it didn't stop you from
I'm sympathetic. I'm sympathetic to this particular perspective.
So it didn't really stop you from becoming a religious person. I mean, you went into the Catholic faith. You've been an active Catholic, etc. You've read the Scripture, done and all that. And so, yeah, that is. Well, thank you for sharing.
What's the meaning of it? What's the meaning of it?
Yeah. Why would that happen? That is interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard that particular thing happen to any other abductee. That's interesting. I wonder if that was kind of a plant in your mind because they understood the type of mind you have, that you're going to not rebel. That's the wrong word here. That's too strong. But you're going to fight authority if it's oppressive. And so they wanted to see how you'd react to it. I don't know. That is really fascinating. That's fun. Very interesting.
Right.
See, I'm coming from a Mormon background. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there are many Mormons who would be upset at all with this theme of, well, there's other life. I mean, that was one of Joseph Smith's revelations that Mormonism teaches, is the other inhabitants out there in the cosmos are also sons and daughters of God, etc. So, and the Danny Sheehan just recently, he was in the Jesuit order. He was legal counsel for the Jesuit order. And he mentioned that the astronomer, I don't know all of the different office names of these gentlemen in the Jesuit order, but the head astronomer, etc., as well as the Pope, just recently came out and they absolutely agreed. Yeah, there are UFOs. I mean, people want full disclosure, and we all scream for it. We want disclosure right now. Criminy, we've had disclosure. They're real. We're having disclosure tonight. What they mean is we want our government to fess up about lying to us that there's nothing here and admit to us that you know something and you've been keeping secrets from us. But as far as declaring the reality of the UFO, Just because a United States senator stands up there or a United States president and says, okay, the UFOs are real, that's not going to make anybody who doesn't believe in them start believing in them just because some guy on television says they're real, right?
Right.
Any more than you telling us about your abduction experiences. If there's people who don't want this to be real, they're not going to believe a word you're saying. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. Everyone's got a different tack on all of this. But for disclosure, the Catholics have already disclosed it. The Mormons have already disclosed it. And the Congress and the House and the Senate a few years back already said they're real. What they're hiding is the tech, the nuts and bolts and stuff. So this is kind of an interesting argy-bargy, isn't it? What's your take on these hearings that's been happening this year? How do you see those?
I've some things bother me that I left out. I'm going to get to the hearings, and because I really want to go on the record and say that I don't know if you've read Lou Elizondo's book Imminent.
Absolutely.
He talks about, and I knew about, what he talked about in the book already, that a number of people in the Pentagon have the opinion that the beings we're interacting with, meaning the abductees, are demons. That's not a theory that I've subscribed to. Because there's so much.
Say that one more time.
That they are of the world of demonology. That they are demons.
Oh, I see.
They're not. They don't have physical form. They're deceiving us. And I want to just go on the record by saying I don't subscribe to this. I just think there's too much physical evidence that, as I mentioned before, that grays or those are the beings that I've interacted with. But whoever these species are that are visiting the Earth, there's so much evidence that they have physical form, that there's so much evidence that the U.S. government has not only the bodies of some of these beings, but has recovered a number of their spacecraft. So this is why I think there's just so much evidence that the nature of these particular beings that are visiting, abducting us are physical and not quote unquote spiritual.
Have you ever? Yeah, I'm with you on that. Have you ever been X-rayed for that little implant or anything? Has anyone ever seen any kind of an implant in you?
Well, the question is it there? And I can't say it's not there.
Interesting.
So because of the fact that I have not had any neuroimaging to confirm whether it's a CT scan or an MRI, that I've got someone
curious if it's there or not. Though?
Yes.
That might be fascinating, Wow. If it's there, any way to pull it out and test it and look at it and see what does this thing do? Maybe reverse engineer one of the implants. I don't know. Am I crossing too many bridges with that thinking?
No, because for one thing, I've been strongly considering at least having the neuroimaging, just to put this question to bed, just to rule out whether or not I still have something worthy of study. Now, unfortunately, with all the implants that have been removed from abductees, Dr. Roger Lear, the podiatric surgeon that's done a lot of work on this, was able to cover a lot of implants that have been subjected to scientific analysis. In his case, none of them were removed from the head. Now, there have been a couple that have been analyzed that were removed from the nasal cavity. At least the abductee claimed that when, again, after sneezing, the implant came out of the nose, or it just came out spontaneously. Unfortunately, although they've done some surface analysis of the implants showing that there are radioisotopic ratios that don't occur naturally here in any material on Earth, they haven't really analyzed them sufficiently to determine whether or not there are functionalities, that these particular implants have any specific function. They have circuitry, for example, indicating that they were manufactured.
Yeah, I want to show
Right,
that
right.
picture of those implants. Now, this is greatly magnified, but you've got a picture, and you have a really cool discussion in your book, but they are little spheres made out of 49% gold and 51% silver.
Right.
Is what you
And
said. Interesting.
this was from a very unusual case that was investigated by someone who calls himself the alien hunter, Daryl Sims, who has, I think, collected more implants from abductees than any investigator. And how I thought it was so interesting that particular material that was, I think, obtained in the 1990s with 49% gold, 51% silver, has a material composition that became very interesting to material scientists, and 20 years later was demonstrated to have very interesting electromagnetic properties that I discussed.
You were saying that, yeah. So do you think, or did he find out if these are hollow or if they're solid, if they have any kind of electrical?
That's what I was getting to, that no one has carefully sectioned any of these implants and examined the internal structure, to my knowledge, to determine whether or not there's any circuitry.
They're not telling us. There's no way. There's no way they're going to leave that unexplored. Yeah, they're just not telling. I can't fathom.
You're right. You're right.
Someone having an alien implant, not absolutely making sure they know everything about it. I think they would know personally. There's enough conspiracy here, but that's, yeah.
But you've looked at it. I've looked throughout the literature. There's no reports. I've only seen a single report claiming that on the exterior of this circular implant, there is a radio transmitter, and they've done electron microscopy to confirm that particular, the image, that particular functionality, and measure the radio signals from it. That's the only case where I could point to where an implant is removed from an abductee that indicates it was manufactured. It's not artificial. It's not naturally occurring, but either by some government agency or by some non-human intelligence, this particular device was manufactured for implantation.
That's what Jerry Nolan says about that piece of metal that he got, that they said, some witnesses said as a UFO flew over him, it dropped from the UFO. It was molten metal, and he got a chunk of it. And he said, after my testing, what I can confirm is that this is a manufactured item. That doesn't mean it's alien, but the manufacturing, the way the metals are separated, are far more that it was layered, but he said the layers are far more clean on the down to the atomic level, which is not something we can do. So there is manufacturing involved. So this is interesting. That would be interesting to see.
Right. And like I say, that material, of course, was I think dropped by a UFO, but I think there have been very interesting scientific findings from the study of these biological implants that indicate not only that they're manufactured, but the materials themselves. And when a few cases, for example, not only were the radioisotope ratios different from anything on Earth, but the purity of the material. In one case, there was actually several instances, the material was found to be 99% aluminum, which doesn't occur naturally. It doesn't occur by any human manufacturing process. So that hypothetically is an alien material. But you know, like you were saying, if anything identifying any research identifying an implant as a smoking gun has been done, no one is reporting it. They're keeping it under wraps.
You would think that would be a huge study. However, I mean, these guys who say they've collected these, there's no way I can possibly believe they wouldn't have scientists looking at them to try to figure it out. Because I mean, if they are the first ones to show how an alien implant works, we're talking world fame. You know, and I gets on to human vanity, but who wouldn't have an opportunity? Who wouldn't take the opportunity to have really good scientists check this stuff out and see, right?
And why, like the whole phenomenon, why publicize it if it's going to have very, very valuable commercial and military applications? Of course, they're going to have to keep it secret.
Yeah,
and that's
so
a big problem.
Yeah, right. And it is somewhat unfortunate, in my opinion, that all we humans can think of is the military applications. And I'm not pointing fingers at you, but I'm just saying,
or commercial, yeah,
or commercial, yeah,
right, yeah.
Yeah, I get it though, because who wouldn't want? I mean, seriously now, who wouldn't want an exotic new element that could potentially help humanity, either medically or, you know, whatever. So yeah, this is something else.
What about the cases? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was going to quickly say, what about the cases where abductees claim at the time when they're on board a UFO and they've been implanted, not only are there alien beings, but there are humans on board that look like scientists, and there's some speculation that, you know, our military is cooperating with the alien beings in conducting these type of experiments because of the fact that
these have actually seen other humans on those as well,
on board at the same time. I never did, but a number of abductees have said that. I've never seen this, but what? You know,
I had no idea.
You've heard the stories about Dwight David Eisenhower's treaty with the Greys, that they would be, when he met them at, I think after a landing at Holloman Air Force Base, there's been some report, and actually his great granddaughter Laura Eisenhower, I think, confirms this, that he made a treaty with the Greys that in return for technology being given to humans, the humans would allow some of their species to be experimented on by the Greys.
Interesting. I'm tempted to ask my audience, hey, for fun, you guys and gals, let me ask you, who in the audience would be willing to volunteer being investigated and looked at by the aliens? Type a 1 if you would, and type a 2 for no. I'm just kind of curious to see.
Wow.
I don't know if I would, Bruce. You know, yeah. If they would let us examine them, then I would let them examine me. I'll put it that way. If they would be willing to let me video record the whole shebang and have them examined by a bona fide doctor, such as yourself, I would call you and fly you out here to my place to examine an alien. In that sense, I would do it. 1, yes. 2, okay, so it's about 50-50, Bruce. And that makes sense.
Well, I talked about one possible theory that, you know, they're trying to, you know, experiment on us so we can develop these extrasensory abilities. If I was assured I would be able to become a remote viewer or to be able to communicate telepathically as a result of the experiment, I might consider being a subject.
All right. I can't argue with that. Okay, I'm with you.
As long as the experiments were performed in an entirely safe manner.
Yeah.
I might be open to that.
I hear you. I'm with you.
Because of my scientific background, I would be so fascinated with this.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. And I don't have a scientific background near the caliber of yours, my man, but I've dabbled in it. I'll put it that way.
So you'd be up for it?
If I knew it could be safe and no side effects, unlike so many of our damn pharmaceutical drugs, right?
Exactly.
You
Right.
know, we are guinea pigs, whether we like it or not, with all
Yes.
these stupid drug treatments, different pills and stuff. But
And I am a pharmacologist by training, so I have
oh
to. I still
God,
have
you
to.
made me
I
insult
still
you.
have. I still have to agree with you.
Oh
I wish
yeah.
we
Well, there's
we
so many
can.
side effects as we're an experiment,
Right.
obviously. How can we learn everything about the drugs anyway, right? I mean, let's be
Right.
real.
Right.
It's
Right.
just it's a fast. I'm grateful. Don't get me wrong either. Sincerely, I am so grateful for the medicinal where
Sure.
we're at in medicine right now compared to my grandfather's day. He
Mhm.
told me what it was like to go to a dentist. I promise you love your dentist today compared to what your grandparents go through.
I'm sure.
Yeah, so very interesting, very interesting. Uh, I was going to ask you something else, Bruce. Um, oh, yes. If it's okay with you, we've still got a little bit of time, and I know the audience is going to love this. Okay, so, and I'm not trying to just tote his book. I know there's so many people who are jaded. They say, yeah, you get a guy on, and he's written a book, and then you promote the book. In this case, yes, I do. Because
Thank you.
Dr. Bruce Rapuano has put together some really interesting science in here. Would you care going over? I mean, it is his astonishing story of abduction as well, but this book is, and I'm not trying to put any other book down. I swear to goodness, I'm not. I love all the UFO books I've ever read so far. But this is a level above because you're bringing out the, for instance, and you don't have to go into a lot of detail. The book really does fabulous. But one of the things in your book that I just I kept turning the page. I'm going, wow, I've never heard this. I didn't understand the connection there. Oh, hey, he's bringing in what is it, just in a nutshell for us, John Q. Publics. What is the relationship, as you understand it, with 0 point energy and anti-gravity? Because this is kind of one of the big subjects, you know. They're saying, how did David Fravor's radar on the most sophisticated jet of the Navy get locked onto this tic-tac looking thing and it still zipped off? It must be propelled by anti-gravity. Can you kind of give us a beginner's course on what in the hell is anti-gravity and why can't we do it? How would we do that?
You know, Kerry, just based on observation and that any UFO witness has made of the performance characteristics of these UFOs, going back to the 60s, the 50s and 60s. I talk about the incident at the intrusion by 12 UFOs over Edwards Air Force Base.
Uh-oh, you froze.
Years later said,
Oh, okay,
these
hold on.
objects could. Oh, can you hear me?
You blipped just for about 10
Okay.
seconds there. Sorry. Maybe I can have you sit a little closer to the camera. Oh, you blipped again. Oh, no, you're still here. Okay. It wasn't bad, but you just froze for a second or
Okay.
two. Okay.
And
Okay,
so,
keep going.
so I'm talking about this tower operator at Edwards Air Force Base, for example, in the 60s, claiming these objects can move 20 to 30 miles from the left to the right within a second or two. And now there's only way that objects can move that quickly, can have almost instantaneous acceleration, which is now something that it's an accepted performance characteristic of many UFOs, is the only thing that could allow a spacecraft or aircraft to do that is the ability to bend space-time. In other words, instead of traveling from point A to point B, bring point B to point A, so you're actually bringing where you want to go to where you are. And this is why Bob Lazar's entire story is so entirely plausible to me, because it's the only way I can conceptualize that these UAPs or UFOs, the only way that they can operate the way they do, to demonstrate this almost instantaneous acceleration. And Bob Lazar described that one of his jobs as a senior physicist at Area 51 was to reverse engineer specifically the propulsion system of one of these crash UFOs, which he called a gravity drive. And he described, based on his analysis of part of this gravity drive that was provided to him that could fit on a table type, in terms of the scientific analysis he did, measurements of radioactivity, measurements of the material, the element 115 that he says was the fuel for an antimatter reactor that generated gravitational energy for this gravity drive propulsion system. He makes a very convincing scientific argument, which I basically essentially subscribe to, that the element 115 is somehow inside this matter-antimatter reactor, where matter is collided with antimatter via an annihilation reaction to release this tremendous amount of energy that Bob Lazar says is gravitational energy. And I go over his scientific findings when he analyzed the
what was the name of that? Mucovium, the element 115?
The really striking finding is that he said it was element 115, which at the time, which was 1989, didn't exist. It was heavier than anything in the periodic table at that time that was known.
Yeah.
And yet 20 years later, a team of material scientists in Russia were able to synthesize it from two smaller elements that were able to synthesize element 115.
Oh, is that why it was named after Moscow?
Yeah,
Moscovium?
Right. That's why it was called Moscovium. Confirming that there was an element 115 that Bob Lazar said he studied and analyzed a number of its scientific properties in order to kind of reverse engineer how this particular gravity drive alien propulsion system worked. So, I think the only way I can imagine that these UFOs can move so rapidly and to overcome the great distances in the universe, where even if you travel at the speed of light to the nearest star system would take hundreds or thousands of years to travel. Yeah. But if you can warp space and time by generating so much gravitational energy that can be focused on a specific point in space, you can travel there instantaneously and even faster than the speed of light.
Yeah.
It's
like the analogy I've shown with my two hands. Let's say both of my hands represent 1,000 light years, and on this very outer edge of my hand is Earth, and on this very outer edge of my other hand is another civilization. And if we can
bend it,
those 1,000 light years to 10 feet, you're talking instantaneous travel.
It's startling to realize that any civilization could develop that type of a technology. But, Lazar saw the operation in a laboratory, saw that the gravitational force field could cause an object to be repelled from it because it was an anti-gravitational energy. He was able to witness what the testing of what he called the sports model UFO. Lift off from the ground until it was 100 feet above the ground silently, again using anti-gravity propulsion. And he was able to observe another test over Area 51, where he could see at an altitude of several miles the operation of this recovered UFO traverse
that
10 or
this
20
is a
miles in a
yeah.
very, very rapid, almost traveling instantaneously.
Well, hey,
So he
so if
provides a
we
lot of evidence to support his theory, his
yeah,
claims.
if we've already engineered UFOs and all, is that us we're seeing up there, as some critics are saying, or is it the aliens? Are we going to start having a difficulty distinguishing? We need to start painting our UFOs red, white, and blue to
I'm
distinguish
with
them
you.
from the aliens.
I'm with you. As as a patriotic American, I'm totally with you. But
We
the
Americans are already confused enough.
but we should be a little bit humble because we didn't get the technology from our scientists, even though our scientists, I believe, are capable
Oh, our
of
scientists are
getting there, but with a little help from our friends.
well, it always takes an outside source to jar you.
Right,
It's like
right.
when I was in math class, I was doing 3 pages of math a day thinking, oh, man, I am bad. I am really bad right now. I am top dog. And a kid from over in the far corner came over when he heard I was doing 3 pages of math a day and he wanted to check and he said, well, I've got it up to where I'm doing 7 a day. I'm going, oh my gosh, I thought I was so good, and this guy's even better. So I actually ended up studying with him, right? And I got to where I could do 7 pages a day. So, I mean, So, yes, we need to be humble, but we're sure grateful for you and other scientists who are taking an active interest in helping propel our minds forward with good knowledge. So, yeah. Anything else you want to talk about, Bruce, that you think you
Well,
left out? It should be important. All of it's important, but
yeah. I mean, this might be a good stopping point. We may have to adjourn and then perhaps privately to decide, what would be the next subject for discussion.
yeah. If it's okay with you, I would truly love to invite you to come back. You are such a perfect guest for this subject. Let me first, before we stop though, let me say in all seriousness, not only is this a very readable book, Bruce is a good writer, but this is okay now, and I'm gonna say this wrong. I don't mean it wrong. Bruce is not paying me to promote his book. However, the reason I'm promoting his book is not because he is my guest, but because the science that he puts into this is very nice. Not a bunch of math equations, stay calm. It's not that. His explanation of the relationships with different scientific concepts is well done. I thoroughly enjoyed it. His description of his, well, I loved how you put your own, how when you were recollecting what was happening to you in these abduction experiences, Bruce, the way you were describing it from a child, why is this that? How come they're doing this, etc.
Right.
But as an adult in the science, analyzing the scientific aspects, it's just stinking cool. I'm just not kidding you. Get the book. Now, Bruce, you do this in I bought the more extensive one. It was cheap too. It's not like Bruce is trying to become a millionaire at this. He's not. It's a great price for a book. I'd pay double that. Yes, I'll send you a check, Bruce. But you have 2 different books, and I bought the bigger one, right?
And you and I love talking about the science together. We're both
absolutely
both passionate about it. But the totality of my abduction experiences are also fascinating, simply with respect to my personal experiences alone.
Yes,
which we really haven't. We've only really scratched the surface at this point. Now, there are a lot of readers that are interested in really reading about my personal experiences exclusively, drilling down, into what happened to me, without the science heavy aspects of the book that that you just held up for the audience to see. And for those readers, they can read an abridged version. It's the same title, Dominion Lost, a scientist's own alien abduction encounters. This is less than 200 pages. Now, after reading this book, if they are maybe interested in this more sciencey parts, they can take a look at the second book.
Yeah, this is about 410 pages. This one, yeah. And
not only that, Kerry, in both versions, I have, for both abridged and unabridged versions, I have audiobooks that they can listen to while they're driving to work or driving home after work, or jogging, for example. So I have audiobooks for both of those versions. But again, I'm trying to accommodate the interest of as many readers as possible in having, separate books.
It's fantastic. I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this book. Now, I mean this when I say this, you guys, for my audience. Richard Dolan's very famous book, UFOs in the 21st Century Mind,
I'm very familiar with that.
As well written. He doesn't go into the science so much as he goes into the history. But if you liked this one, you will like this one, because they've got that same high caliber of quality information in them. And I know I'm not trying to make this into an infomercial. I get that. But I love books. And by dang, I go out of my way to get good books and fill my mind with good knowledge. And this is. So that's my 10 cents worth.
Thank you.
So, Bruce, thank you again for being. This has been so much fun for me. Stick around after we close out, and we'll talk for a few minutes. But you've been a delightful guest. You're so knowledgeable, and you're so down to earth, and yet you're way out in space. Right? we have to reach for the sky. I'm
very well said. Very well said.
So, and I want to thank my audience. Appreciate all you guys. Appreciate all your support. We will be back with more lives on all things UFO. There will be times when I have guests. There will be other times when I don't. It's all good. We will definitely have Dr. Rapuano back, because he wasn't kidding. And it's probably partly my fault as a host, but I didn't ask him as many in-depth questions about his abduction experience as I was intending. And it's all good. It doesn't matter, because I will have him on again, and we will go into more depth. But I will also have him on so that we can get into the subject. We've had a good discussion of neuroscience and the aspects of why consciousness research is 100% relevant to the UFO issue. And it's so fascinating, because we learn about our own minds in ways that I know is going to be new. And we have a living neuroscientist to explain that to us. Lots of fun future live broadcasts coming up for you, my audience. In the meantime, remember, have a good evening. Work hard, do well, be good, pray well, think good thoughts, make lots of friends, and smile, because it makes people wonder what the hell you've been doing. And that's fun to do. Bug people a little bit with niceness. It'll kill them, I promise. But it's the best way. See you guys later.